There are wars you can leave behind, but this one, it followed them home. They were just boys, some 18, some younger, shipped thousands of miles away to fight in a jungle most couldn't even pronounce. They arrived with rifles, helmets, and patriotic fire. But they would leave, those who did leave, with scars far deeper than any bullet could carve. The Vietnam War wasn't the longest in American history. It wasn't the bloodiest. But in many ways, it was the war that most deeply fractured the American psyche. Why? What made this one so different? What happened in those jungles, in those rice paddies, in the skies above Hanoi that still echoes today? Let's go back. It began in the shadows of Cold War anxiety. The fear of communism spreading like wildfire across Southeast Asia had Washington on edge. The domino theory took hold. If South Vietnam fell, so would Laos, Cambodia, Thailand. So they said, the United States had to act. By 1955, the first U.S. military advisors were on the ground. By 1965, full combat troops had landed. And by the late 1960s, over 500,000 American soldiers were deployed in Vietnam. Think about that. 500,000 boots on the ground, fighting in sweltering heat, plagued by monsoons, snakes, landmines, and an enemy that vanished into the trees. But numbers don't tell the whole story. Behind every statistic was a life interrupted. Over 2.7 million Americans served in Vietnam. More than 58,000 never came home. Their names now stretch across the polished black granite of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C., etched into stone, frozen in time. And they weren't the only ones who paid the price. It's estimated that 2 million Vietnamese civilians were killed. Over 1 million North Vietnamese and Viet Cong fighters lost their lives. And the South Vietnamese military suffered nearly 250,000 casualties. The land itself became a victim. Napalm and Agent Orange, meant to defoliate the jungle, left generations sick, poisoned, and deformed. To this day, children are born with birth defects linked to those chemicals. Crops still struggle to grow in contaminated soil. But the damage didn't stop at Vietnam's borders. When U.S. soldiers returned home, they didn't receive parades. They were met with protests, shame, silence. Many were spat on in airports, others were told to hide their service. For the first time in American history, the war was televised. Every bloody firefight, every crying child, every burning village. And the American people began to question, why are we there? What are we fighting for? Who are we fighting against? That question, why, echoed through college campuses, city streets, and the halls of Congress. The war became a symbol of division, of lost trust, of a government that sent its sons to die for a cause it couldn't clearly define. And so, in 1973, U.S. combat troops withdrew. 2 years later, Saigon fell. The world watched as desperate South Vietnamese civilians clung to the last American helicopters lifting off rooftops. The war was over, but it wasn't really over. Over 150,000 U.S. veterans returned with PTSD. Thousands more struggled with drug addiction, homelessness, and suicide. Families were shattered. Generations grew up watching fathers suffer in silence. And yet somehow life went on. Today, Vietnam is a different country. Its jungles have grown back. Its cities bustle with modern life. But the shadows of war still linger in silent graves and unexploded bombs buried beneath rice fields. The Vietnam War wasn't just a war. It was a turning point, a mirror. It forced the world and America to look inward, to ask hard questions about power, politics, and the price of intervention. It showed us that firepower doesn't guarantee victory, that hearts and minds can't be conquered at gunpoint. So what do we do with that knowledge? We remember, not to glorify, not to justify, but to learn, to feel, to listen to the stories of those who fought and those who never got the chance to speak. The soldier in the mud, the medic gripping a bleeding friend, the Vietnamese child running from fire, the helicopter pilot counting bullets. Because the Vietnam War wasn't just history, it was humanity on trial. And the verdict is still being written. Every name carved in stone, every haunting photograph, every battlefield overgrown with grass, they whisper the same message. Never forget what war truly costs, not in medals, not in maps, but in memory, in soul, in silence, and in the faces of those who carry it, long after the last shot was fired.